The deadliest weapon in the Mancini arsenal wasn't a gun, but a 100-pound Pitbull named Rocco who never stood guard at the wrong door. When a 6-year-old girl walked out of the shadows and tamed the beast with a single touch, the word she whispered didn't just break the silence, it shattered the empire. I never thought a single mistake, a door, a dog, and a child, could crack open the darkest secret inside the Mancini estate. But that morning in Staten Island, everything shifted, and I, Riley Trent, ended up witnessing a truth that rewrote the entire hierarchy of one of New York's most feared mafia families. It started when I was hired as the Mancini's new logistics coordinator, basically a glorified problem solver for people who created more problems than they solved. I'd only been there 3 weeks, still learning who hated whom, who pretended not to hate whom, and which hallway not to walk down after midnight. The scariest thing in the house wasn't even a person. It was Rocco, the boss's Pitbull, massive, trained, and utterly unpredictable. Everyone knew the rule. If Rocco was standing guard outside a door, you stayed 20 feet back unless you wanted to lose a limb or something even more important. That morning, the mansion was on a razor's edge. A shipment had gone missing somewhere between Newark and Baltimore, tensions were high, and the boss, Dominic Mancini, was running hotter than usual. He was a towering figure, tattoos peeking out from a shirt half unbuttoned, pacing the marble hallways like an earthquake trapped in human form. But something was wrong. Rocco wasn't guarding the vault room or Dominic's office like he normally did. He was standing rigid, hackles raised, outside a door that didn't matter at all, just one of the old guest rooms at the end of the East Wing that no one used except for storage. I remember clutching my clipboard, stepping closer and whispering, "Dom, I think your dog's in the wrong place." Dominic barely looked at me, then froze mid-step. His eyes locked on the door. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw fear. Real, unadulterated fear. "Rocco never chooses the wrong door," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "Someone's in there." Before he could do anything, before he could draw the piece tucked into his waistband, the door creaked open. It was slow and soft, agonizingly loud in the silent hallway. And that's when she walked in. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She wore a tiny gray dress that looked like it had seen better days, and her hair was a mass of straight brown curls. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She was just calm. Like she belonged there. Dom lunged forward, panic flashing in his eyes. "Kid, stop. Don't touch." But she already had her hand on Rocco's head. The dog, moments ago a loaded weapon ready to snap bone, melted under her touch. His eyes softened, his massive body relaxed, and his tail gave a slow, unsure wag. She patted him like he was some sleepy golden retriever on a suburban porch. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. Dom looked like he'd seen a ghost. And then the girl said something that made every nerve in my body stand up. "Hi, Daddy." The air left the room. Dominic Mancini, the man who'd burned 3 crews to the ground for threatening his family, had a daughter no one knew existed. He shook his head, stunned, his tough exterior cracking. "No, that's not possible." The girl smiled, her big brown eyes unblinking. "My mom said you might say that." She reached into her pocket and handed him a folded piece of paper. A birth certificate. Dom took it, his hands shaking slightly. He staggered back like he'd been shot in the chest. I'd seen this man stare down armed rivals without blinking, but this shattered him. Before he could speak, the door behind the girl, the wrong door, slowly opened wider, revealing a hidden room none of us knew existed. Inside were boxes. Old ones, covered in dust. And on every box was the Mancini family crest. Dom whispered, his voice barely audible, "Those aren't mine." I stepped inside, unable to stop myself. The room was filled with files, photos, old hard drives, and coded ledgers, evidence. But not just any evidence. These were files tying the Mancini empire to crimes Dom never committed. Crimes that predated him. Crimes everyone assumed he had committed. The girl, still calmly petting the dog, looked at me and said, "My mom told me to bring him here. She said it was time for him to know who really built everything." Dom's breathing sharpened, his gaze snapping from the boxes to the child. "Who's your mother?" The girl smiled like she'd been waiting her whole life for that question. You already know her. She said you'd try to pretend you forgot. My stomach dropped at the same moment Dom's expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. A man realizing he's just glimpsed a threat he never planned for. That's when the second twist hit. The little girl pulled a silver pendant from her dress. A pendant with initials every Mafia member in New York would recognize instantly. Lena Russo. The black woman who had co-founded the Mancini empire alongside Dom's father before disappearing a decade ago. The woman Dom once loved and betrayed. Dom stumbled back, clutching the doorframe. She's alive. The girl only nodded. But before Dom could say another word, Rocco snapped his head toward the far end of the hallway, ears up, muscles tightening, a low growl building in his chest like a distant thunder. Someone else was in the house. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The girl whispered, her voice trembling for the first time, "My mom said this part might be dangerous." Dom reached for his gun. Rocco bared his teeth. And I felt the temperature in the mansion drop 10 degrees. Whatever Lena Russo had set in motion had only just begun. The hallway lights flickered. Footsteps echoed. And everything went silent. Can a man ever truly outrun the sins of his past? Or does destiny always come to collect the debt in blood? If you were Dom, would you trust the ghost of a lover you betrayed? Subscribe to the channel right now, like this video, and comment below with the city you are watching from. The darkness in the hallway wasn't empty. It had weight. The footsteps stopped just beyond the flickering sconce light, heavy and deliberate. Dom didn't hesitate. He grabbed the girl by her small shoulder and shoved her backward toward me. "Get her inside," he hissed, the command leaving no room for argument. "Lock the door." I scrambled back into the dust-choked room, pulling the girl with me. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just held onto that silver pendant like it was a shield. I kicked the door shut, leaving it cracked just an inch, enough to see, enough to fire through if I had to. I didn't have a gun, just a box cutter from the warehouse floor I hadn't emptied from my pocket. It felt pathetic against what was coming. "Dominic?" A voice echoed from the dark. Gravelly. Dom stiffened, his silhouette rigid against the dim light. "Carlo? That you?" Carlo Moretti. Dom's right hand. The man who sat at Sunday dinner and broke bread with the family. But his voice was wrong. It was too high, too tight. "I heard noise, boss. Just checking the perimeter." "With the safety off?" Dom's voice was ice. "Put it away, Carlo." Rocco growled, a low vibration that shook the floorboards. The dog knew. Animals always know before people do. Carlo stepped into the light. He was sweating, despite the mansion's aggressive air conditioning. His eyes darted past Dom, trying to see into the room behind him. Trying to see the boxes. "You weren't supposed to find this room, Dom. It was sealed for a reason. Is that right?" Dom took a step forward, his hands empty but his posture lethal. "And who sealed it? My father? Or the rats he hired?" "It doesn't matter now," Carlo said, raising his pistol, the barrel shaking slightly. "The commission, they want peace. They don't want old laundry aired out. You were supposed to just be the muscle, Dom. Not the historian." "Betrayal isn't laundry," Dom snarled. The girl tugged on my sleeve, her voice a whisper. "Rocco won't let him hurt Daddy." She was right. As Carlo's finger tightened on the trigger, the Pitbull became a blur of muscular motion. Rocco launched himself not at the arm, but straight at the chest. The impact sounded like a car crash. Carlo's gun went off, the bullet shattering a Ming vase down the hall, but he was already on his back, screaming as Rocco pinned him to the marble. Dom didn't flinch at the gunshot. He walked over, kicked the gun away, and looked down at his betrayal-made flesh. "Who sent you, Carlo?" "It's over, Dom," Carlo wheezed, blood on his teeth as the dog held him down. "She's back. And she's not alone." Dom silenced him with a heavy boot to the temple, knocking him cold. The silence returned, heavier than before. He looked back at the crack in the door, his eyes meeting mine. "Pack the boxes, Riley," Dom said, his voice void of emotion but heavy with purpose. "We're leaving. Tonight." "Where?" I asked, pushing the door open, my hands trembling. Dom looked at the little girl, who was now walking fearlessly toward the unconscious traitor to calm the dog again. To find Lena, Dom said, before she burns the rest of the world down. The mansion was a fortress designed to keep people out, but now it was a cage keeping us in. The echo of the gunshot had died down, but the house was waking up. I could hear shouting from the servants' quarters and the heavy tread of the perimeter security team moving toward the main hall. Riley grabbed the red box. "Leave the rest," Dom commanded, scooping the little girl into his arms. She didn't protest, wrapping her arms around his neck with a familiarity that made my head spin. Rocco shadowed them, a silent gray ghost, blood still smeared on his muzzle. "The red box? That's just ledgers," I argued, hefting the dusty crate. "It weighed a ton." "It's the leverage," Dom snapped, kicking the back door open. "Move." We bypassed the grand garage filled with Ferraris and armored SUVs. Instead, Dom led us to the loading bay where the catering van sat. He pointed to a nondescript white Ford Transit. "You drive. I shoot." "I'm logistics, not a getaway driver," I stammered, fumbling for the keys hanging on the wall hook. "Logistics means getting from point A to point B without dying," Dom growled. He slid the side door open, ushering the girl and the massive dog inside. "Today, you earn your paycheck." I slammed the van into gear just as the kitchen doors burst open. Two guards, men I'd shared coffee with that morning, spilled out, weapons drawn. They hesitated. They saw the van, saw Dom, but they didn't fire. Not yet. Confusion was our only shield. "Floor it," Dom said calmly. I stomped on the gas. The van shrieked against the polished concrete, fishtailing out of the bay and onto the long, winding driveway. The main gate was closed, a wrought iron barrier between us and the night. "Ram it." I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. "No. Stop," Dom ordered. I slammed the brakes, screeching to a halt inches from the metal. The gate guard, a kid named Vinny, stepped out of the booth, looking terrified. He had a phone in one hand and a shotgun in the other. Dom rolled down the window. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just looked at Vinny with the dead, shark-like stare that had made him the king of New York. "Open it to Vinny, or I come out there." Vinny looked at the phone, then at Dom. He was weighing his life against his orders. He dropped the phone. The gate buzzed and began to swing open. As we peeled out onto the street, leaving the Mancini estate behind, the girl spoke up from the back seat, her voice cutting through the adrenaline. "Mommy said you were good at scaring people." Dom looked at her in the rearview mirror, his expression softening just a fraction. "What's your name, kid?" "Amara," she said. "Amara." Dom tested the name. It sounded foreign on his tongue. "Where is she, Amara? Where is Lena?" Amara pointed a small finger toward the windshield, toward the glowing skyline of Manhattan across the water. "She's where it started. The old bakery on Arthur Avenue." Dom went pale. "That place burned down 6 years ago." "She fixed it," Amara said simply. I merged onto the expressway, checking the mirrors. No tail yet, but I knew it wouldn't last. We were 3 fugitives in a catering van, carrying a century of secrets and a dog with a taste for blood. The logistics of this were a nightmare. "Arthur Avenue," I muttered. "Little Italy." "No," Dom corrected, checking the clip of his gun. "Ground Zero." The Verrazano Bridge flashed overhead, a strobing rhythm of steel and light that did nothing to hypnotic the tension inside the van. I kept my eyes on the road, checking the mirrors every 4 seconds. Logistics habit. If you aren't paranoid, you aren't paying attention. "Open it," Dom said. He wasn't talking to me. He was staring at the red box on his lap. "I don't have the key," I said, merging lanes to avoid a slow-moving truck. "I don't need a key." Dom produced a switchblade, the click loud in the enclosed space. He jammed the tip into the lock mechanism and twisted. The metal groaned and snapped. The lid creaked open. Inside, it wasn't gold or cash. It was just paper. Bound leather ledgers, smelling of mildew and old tobacco. Dom ran a hand over the spine of the top one. His fingers, usually steady enough to light a cigarette in a windstorm, were trembling. 1998, he whispered. The year the feds raided the docks. The year Lena. He stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. The year she disappeared? I supplied, risking a glance. The year she was supposed to die, Dom corrected. He flipped the book open. His eyes scanned the columns of numbers, the handwriting familiar. This isn't my father's writing. This is hers. But the signatures authorizing the shipments, they're his. He slammed the book shut. The realization hit the air like a physical blow. His father hadn't just driven Lena away, he had framed her. He had used her brilliance to build the empire and then sold her out to save his own skin. And Dom, the dutiful son, had believed the lie that she was the traitor. Mommy says numbers don't lie, Amara said. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the van, sharing a bag of beef jerky with Rocco. The dog chewed with a wet, rhythmic sound. People lie. Numbers just sit there. Dom looked at the child, his expression a mix of heartbreak and awe. She taught you that? She teaches me everything, Amara said. She says you have to be smart first and tough second. We're here, I announced, my throat tight. The Bronx was different at night. Shadows stretched longer here. We turned onto Arthur Avenue, the heart of the old neighborhood. It was quiet, the restaurants closed, the streetlights humming. But half a block down, standing like a ghost among the living, was the building. Russo's Pastries. It was supposed to be a burnt-out shell. A vacant lot. Instead, the brick was scrubbed clean. The windows were new, gleaming under the street lamp. The sign above the door was freshly painted in gold leaf. It didn't look like a hideout. It looked like a monument. I pulled the van to the curb, killing the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. I thought you said it burned down, I whispered. It did, Dom said, his hand resting on the door handle. He was staring at the front window. Inside, a single light was on in the back. She rebuilt it, brick by brick. Rocco stood up, a low whine escaping his throat. His tail gave a single, stiff wag. Is she in there? Dom asked Amar. The little girl unbuckled herself and climbed over the seat. She didn't look at the bakery. She looked at Dom. She's waiting, Amara said. But Daddy? You have to knock. You can't just kick this door down. Dom took a deep breath, holstered his gun, and opened the van door. Stay close, Riley. If this goes sideways, you take the girl and you run. And you. I deserve whatever happens in there. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful, silver sound that had no business signaling the end of a 10-year war. I followed Dom inside, the red box heavy in my arms. The air in the bakery didn't smell like dust or gun oil. It smelled of anise, vanilla, and rising dough. It smelled like a memory. The display cases were empty, scrubbed clean, but the warmth of the ovens lingered in the air. At the back of the shop, sitting at a small round marble table, was a woman. She didn't look up immediately. She was dragging a finger through a dusting of flour on the tabletop, drawing patterns. She wore a simple black turtleneck and trousers, practical and sharp. Her hair, once worn in the long, flowing style I'd seen in old surveillance photos, was now cropped short, framing a face that had hardened into something beautiful and terrifying. "Hello, Dominic," she said. Her voice was smoke and honey. Dom stopped 10 feet away. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to push him. "Lena." Rocco let out a sharp yip. He pulled hard on the leash, dragging Amara forward. The dog reached the woman and buried his massive head in her lap. Lena stopped tracing patterns and rested her hand on the dog's scarred skull, scratching behind his ears exactly where he liked it. "He remembers," Lena said softly, finally looking up. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and completely void of forgiveness. Dogs are loyal. They don't listen to rumors. The accusation hit Dom square in the chest. He took a step forward, his hands open. "I didn't know. My father, he showed me the wiretaps. The bank transfers. It all looked real." "Of course it did," Lena said, her voice remaining calm. "He spent $3 million manufacturing that evidence. He knew you loved me. And he knew that was the only way to break us. I brought the ledgers," I blurted out, stepping into the light. "The red box." Lena shifted her gaze to me. It felt like being scanned by an X-ray. And who is this stray? Riley, Dom answered. He's new. He helped get Amar out. Riley, she repeated, tasting the name. Put the box down, Riley. It's useless. Useless. Dom frowned. It proves my father framed you. It clears your name. Lena stood up. She was tall, commanding the space effortlessly. I don't need my name cleared, Dom. I'm legally dead. It's a very convenient status for what needs to happen next. She walked around the table and knelt in front of Amara, cupping the girl's face. Did you do what I said? Yes, Mama, Amara nodded. I walked in the wrong door. Good girl. Lena kissed her forehead, then stood to face Dom again. The softness vanished. The Mancinis are compromised, Dom. Not just by your father's old sins. The commission has voted. They're liquidating the family tonight. Dom's eyes widened. Liquidating? They can't. I have the territory. You have nothing, Lena corrected. Your captains are bought. Your safe houses are burned. Why do you think Carlo was in the house? He wasn't checking the perimeter. He was the cleaning crew. She walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the empty street. I didn't bring you here to reminisce, Dominic. I brought you here because you're the bait. Bait for who? Lena turned back, a grim smile playing on her lips. For the man who actually runs New York now. The man who paid your father to frame me. Dom's hand drifted to his gun. Who? Your uncle, Lena said. Sal. The silence in the bakery was deafening. Sal Mancini. The peacemaker. The retired elder statesman of the family. Sal is in Florida, Dom said, shaking his head. He's retired. Sal is in a black SUV 3 blocks away, Lena said, checking her watch. And thanks to the tracker I put in that red box you're holding, he knows exactly where we are. I looked down at the box in my hands like it was a live grenade. You led them here? Dom roared. I needed them in one place, Lena said coolly, pulling a shotgun from beneath the counter. She racked the slide. Welcome back to the family, Dom. Try not to miss. Drop the box by the front door, Riley, Lena commanded. She didn't look at me. She was busy flipping the sign on the door from open to closed, then locking it. If they want the evidence, let them come get it. I scrambled to obey, my hands sweating against the leather. I set the heavy crate down right on the welcome mat and sprinted back behind the heavy marble counter. Sal. Dom paced the small space behind the counter, checking the sight on his pistol. He looked like a man trying to solve a puzzle while the pieces were burning. He gave me my first knife. He taught me how to tie a tie. Why? Because power doesn't like to be shared, Dominic, Lena said, checking the magazine of her shotgun. And because your father was weak. Sal saw an opportunity to take the crown and the kingdom, but he needed a scapegoat. Me. She turned to Amar. The little girl was already moving toward a heavy steel door near the ovens, a walk-in freezer. You know the drill, baby. Head down, ears covered, Amara recited calmly. She looked at Rocco. Guard. The dog didn't hesitate. He trotted into the freezer with her. The heavy door clicked shut with a pneumatic hiss, sealing them in bulletproof safety. Now, Lena said, her eyes shifting to the street. Kill the lights. I found the breaker box on the wall and flipped the master switch. The bakery plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the orange glow of the street lamps outside filtering through the blinds. We waited. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. Then the hum of engines. 3 black SUVs rolled down Arthur Avenue, moving slow, like sharks in shallow water. They stopped right in front of the shop. Doors opened in unison. Men spilled up for tactical gear, suppressed rifles, efficient movement. Wait for it, Lena whispered. The lead man approached the door. He saw the red box through the glass. He signaled to the others. Now! Lena yelled. She didn't fire at the men. She fired at the red box. The slug from her shotgun smashed through the glass door and punched into the crate. I expected papers to fly. Instead, the box detonated. It wasn't a nuclear explosion, but it was enough. A concussive blast of flash powder and force blew the door off its hinges and sent the lead man flying backward into the street. The bakery windows shattered inward, raining shards of glass over the counter like deadly confetti. "Move!" Dom roared, popping up over the marble. The street was chaos. The flashbang rigged inside the box had blinded the first wave. Dom double-tapped 2 men before they could recover. Lena pumped the shotgun, the sound mechanical and rhythmic, taking out a third who tried to flank the broken window. I huddled on the floor, clutching my box cutter, feeling useless. Logistics. Think logistics. They have superior numbers, but we have the fatal funnel. "Riley! Ammo!" Lena shouted, kicking a duffel bag toward me. I unzipped it. Loaded magazines. I started sliding them across the floor to Dom and Lena like a bartender sliding drinks. "Sal isn't in the street," Dom gritted out, reloading. "He's watching." "He's in the middle SUV," Lena said, firing again. "And he's not leaving until we're dead." Suddenly, the back wall of the bakery exploded inward. Not the glass front, the brick back wall. A van had rammed through the alley entrance, bricks showering down on the ovens. "Flank!" I screamed, the word leaving my mouth before I processed it. Dust choked the air. Red laser sights cut through the gloom, sweeping over us. We were pinned from the front and the back. Lena looked at Dom. For the first time, she smiled. A real, terrifying smile. "You wanted to know how I survived 10 years, Dominic?" she asked, pulling a small remote detonator from her pocket. I stopped playing by Mafia rules. Lena didn't hesitate. Her thumb depressed the red button. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, the support beams above the rear breach, where the van had just crashed through, sheared with a sound like a cracking whip. The entire second floor of the bakery, weighted down with heavy industrial mixers Lena had likely placed there for this exact purpose, collapsed. Tons of timber, brick, and steel rained down on the tactical team in the alley. The screams were cut short by the roar of debris. Dust billowed out like a pyroclastic flow, blinding us all. "Freezer! Now!" Lena commanded, grabbing my collar and hauling me up. Dom fired 2 blind shots toward the front window to keep heads down, then sprinted after us. We piled into the walk-in freezer. The cold hit our sweat-slicked skin instantly, a shocking contrast to the heat of the firefight. Amara was sitting on a box of frozen cannoli shells, scratching Rocco's ears. "Was that the big boom, Mommy?" "That was the big boom, baby," Lena said, breathless but composed. She shoved the heavy steel door shut and spun the locking wheel. We were sealed in. "We're trapped," I wheezed, sliding down the wall, clutching my chest. "They'll just drill the locks. Or blow the door." "Let them try," Lena said. She kicked aside a rubber floor mat, revealing a heavy iron grate. "Dom, lift." Dom holstered his weapon, grabbed the iron bars, and heaved. The grate groaned but gave way. A dark, damp hole opened in the floor. A rusted ladder disappeared into the gloom. Prohibition tunnels, Dom realized, a flicker of admiration crossing his face. "My grandfather used these to run rum in the 20s. And I used them to run circles around your uncle," Lena said. "Riley, you first. Then Amara. Dom, you take the dog." It was an awkward, terrifying descent. I slipped twice, scraping my shins on rusted rungs. The air down there was thick, smelling of wet earth and ancient secrets. Rocco was surprisingly agile, Dominic carrying the brunt of the dog's weight over his shoulder like a fireman carrying a survivor. Once we were all down, Lena pulled a lever on the wall. Above us, the grate slammed shut and locked with a heavy clunk. We navigated the narrow passage by the light of Lena's phone. The tunnel was tight, oppressive. "Sal thinks we're buried in the rubble," Dom whispered, his voice echoing slightly against the damp brick. "He'll send a crew to dig us out to confirm the kill." "He will," Lena agreed, setting a fast pace. "Which gives us about 20 minutes. To do what?" "Run," I asked, wiping grime from my face. Lena stopped. The blue light of the phone cast deep shadows on her face, making her look like an avenging angel. "Sal is in that SUV, surrounded by his best men. He's exposed. He thinks he's watching a funeral, Dom. He's not expecting a resurrection." "You want to hit him now?" I asked, incredulous. "We have a child and a dog." We have the element of surprise, Lena corrected. This tunnel comes out in the basement of the laundromat across the street, right behind his convoy. Dom looked at Amara, then at Lena. The conflict in his eyes was a war of its own. Fatherhood versus vengeance. Riley takes Amara and Rocco, Dom decided, his voice hard. They take the van in the alley once we clear it. You and I finish this. Lena nodded, handing Dom a spare magazine. Just like old times. No, Dom racked the slide of his pistol, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Better. The latter ended at a hatch covered in decades of grime. Lena pushed it open, and the smell of detergent and steam replaced the damp earth. We were in the back room of the laundromat. Through the front plate glass, the street was a tableau of destruction. Dust from the collapsed bakery still hung in the air like a shroud. Sal's men were moving toward the rubble, weapons lowered, confident there were no survivors. The middle SUV sat idling, its black tint hiding the architect of our ruin. Riley, Dom said, his voice low. He pressed a set of keys into my hand. Blue sedan, parked in the alley behind this place. Get them out. Drive until the gas light comes on, then switch cars. Okay. I looked at Amara. She was holding Rocco's collar, her face pale but determined. Daddy, she whispered. Dom knelt, ignoring the ticking clock of the tactical situation. He kissed her forehead. I'll find you. I promise. He stood up, his face hardening into a mask of war. He looked at Lena. Ready? Always. I hustled Amara and Rocco out the back exit, toward the alley. But I couldn't just leave. Not yet. I threw them into the back seat of the sedan and paused at the corner of the building, peering out at the street. I had to know. Dom and Lena burst out of the laundromat's front door like vengeful spirits. They didn't scream. They didn't announce themselves. They just fired. The two guards flanking the SUV dropped before they knew they were under attack. The element of surprise was absolute. The men near the rubble spun around, firing wildly, but Dom and Lena were already moving, using the cars for cover, advancing on the center vehicle. It was a dance they had perfected years ago. Cover and move, suppress and advance. Lena blew the tires of the SUV with her shotgun. The vehicle sagged. Dom reached the passenger door. He didn't try to open it. He fired 3 rounds through the glass, shattering the reinforced window. Then he reached in, grabbed a fistful of expensive Italian suit jacket, and hauled the occupant out onto the asphalt. Uncle Sal. He looked older than I remembered. Fragile, almost, as he sprawled on the ground, glass glittering in his silver hair. He looked up at Dom, blinking against the glare of the streetlights. Dominic, Sal wheezed, raising a shaking hand. It was business. Just business. The gunfire around them slowed. The remaining mercenaries realized their paycheck was currently lying in the gutter at gunpoint. Business. Dom echoed, his voice carrying over the sirens wailing in the distance. He aimed his pistol at Sal's heart. You killed my father. You tried to kill the woman I love. You tried to bury my daughter. I did it for the family. Sal shouted, desperate now. To protect the legacy. You are the legacy, Dom said, his voice cold. And I'm erasing it. But the sound was final. Sal slumped back, his ambition bleeding out onto the Arthur Avenue pavement. Dom looked up. Across the chaotic street, his eyes met mine in the shadows of the alley. He gave a single, sharp nod. I scrambled back to the car, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I jumped in the driver's seat and turned the key. Where's Daddy? Amara asked from the back, her voice small. He's cleaning up, I said, my voice trembling as I threw the car into reverse. He's just cleaning up. I drove until the skyline of New York was just a smudge of light in the rearview mirror, a galaxy of electricity that felt 1,000,000 miles away. We ended up at a roadside motel off the Jersey Turnpike, the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker and the sheets smelled of industrial bleach and regret. Logistics, I muttered to myself, pacing the small room. Keep moving. Don't stop. But we had to stop. I had a 6-year-old girl and a 100-pound Pitbull who needed water and rest. Amara was curled up on the lumpy bed, fast asleep, her hand resting on Rocco's flank. The dog was awake, his eyes fixed on the door, ears swiveling at every passing truck. He was still on guard. I turned on the TV, keeping the volume low. The news was already breaking. Gangland massacre on Arthur Avenue. Suspected mob boss Salvatore Mancini dead. Police seeking suspects. They didn't have names yet. Just chaos. I checked my phone for the 100th time. Nothing. No text. No call. Just the mocking silence of a burner phone that might never ring. "They're coming," Amara mumbled in her sleep, rolling over. "I hope so, kid," I whispered. The knock came at 3:14 a.m. It wasn't a secret knock. It was heavy, exhausted. Rocco didn't growl. He let out a sharp whine and scrambled off the bed, tail thumping against the cheap wood paneling. That was all the confirmation I needed. I threw the deadbolt and opened the door. Dominic stood there, leaning against the doorframe like it was the only thing holding him upright. His white shirt was ruined, stained with blood and soot. Lena stood behind him, looking remarkably composed, though her face was streaked with grime and she was favoring her left leg. "You picked a hell of a spot, Riley," Dom rasped, stepping inside. "It was the first place that didn't have cameras in the lobby," I said, locking the door behind them. Dom didn't answer. He walked straight to the bed. He stared down at his sleeping daughter, his face crumpling. The hard lines of the Mafia boss vanished, replaced by the terrified relief of a father. He sank to his knees, burying his face in the mattress near her feet. Lena sat on the flimsy chair in the corner, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. "It's done." "Sal?" I asked. "Dead," she said simply. "And the rest, they scattered. Once the head is cut off, the body doesn't know where to walk." "The police are all over it," I said, gesturing to the TV. "Let them have the bodies," Dom said, his voice muffled. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "The Mancini family died tonight in the Bronx. That's what matters." "So what now?" I asked. "You're the king of New York, Dom. But you're also the most wanted man in the state." Dom reached out and stroked Rocco's head. The dog licked the blood off his hand. "There is no king," Dom said, standing up and wincing. "The empire is over, Riley. I burned it down. I'm not going back to the mansion. I'm not going back to the table." "Then where do we go?" I asked. "You can't just disappear. You're Dominic Mancini." Lena stood up, limping slightly, and moved to Dom's side. She took his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. It was a gesture of solidarity, of a pact renewed in blood. "Dominic Mancini is dead," Lena said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. "We need new names. And I know a place where the water is warm and the extradition treaties are complicated." "Logistics?" I said, a slow grin spreading across my face. "I can work with that." 6 months later, the only thing Rocco was guarding was a sandcastle. The massive Pitbull, once the terror of Staten Island, was currently belly-deep in turquoise water, barking joyfully at a crab that had the audacity to exist. Amara was laughing, her sound carrying over the gentle crash of the waves, ringing clearer than any church bell. I sat on the veranda of the white stucco villa, a cold beer in my hand. My job description had changed again. I wasn't a logistics coordinator for the mob anymore. I was the manager of a small charter boat business on an island that didn't ask too many questions about passports, provided the cash was crisp. "You're staring again, Riley," Lena said, placing a bowl of olives on the table. She looked younger. The hard lines around her eyes had smoothed out, replaced by a golden tan and a serenity I hadn't thought possible. "Hard not to," I admitted, gesturing toward the beach. "Dom is wearing floral print. I'm still waiting for the universe to collapse." Down by the water, Dominic Mancini, the man who had dismantled the New York underworld in a single night, was trying to help Amara rebuild a turret that the tide had washed away. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. He wasn't checking the perimeter. He was just a father, kneeling in the wet sand, serving a new queen. He looked up, caught my eye, and waved. It wasn't the sharp, commanding gesture of a don. It was just a wave. "Do you think they're still looking for us?" I asked Lena. She took a sip of wine, her eyes fixed on her family. The police stopped looking after month 3. The other families, they're too busy fighting over the scraps Dom left behind to worry about ghosts. We got away with it, I whispered, the reality still feeling like a dream. We didn't get away, Lena corrected softly. We just walked through a different door. That night, dinner was loud. It was messy. Amara told a story about a lizard she found. Rocco slept under the table dreaming of crabs, and Dom laughed, a deep, chest-rumbling sound that had been buried under decades of obligation and violence. As I looked around the table, I realized the truth of what had happened. The Mancini estate had been a fortress, but it was empty. This small, rented villa, with its mismatched chairs and salt-stained windows, was full. Rocco had guarded the wrong door that day in the hallway. He had stood watch over a secret that was supposed to destroy Dominic. But instead, that door had been the only one worth opening. It hadn't unleashed a threat, it had released a savior in a gray dress. Dom raised his glass. To the wrong doors, he said, his eyes finding Lena's. And to the family behind them, I added. We clinked glasses. The nightmare was over. The sun had set on the empire, but for the first time in his life, Dominic Mancini was waking up to a dawn he actually wanted to see. This story proves that no matter how dark the past is, love can always break down the door to a brighter future. We all have a wrong door we're scared to open, a risk we're scared to take. But sometimes, that's exactly where our life begins. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in redemption and the power of a second chance, please do not leave without hitting that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means the world to us. Join our family today. We'll leave the light on for you.